Should the United Nations have a veto on Canadian troop deployments? I'm Brian Lilley with TheRebel.media. If you watch the national leaders debate, the MAC debate on Thursday night, you could be forgiven for thinking that the current frontrunner in the polls, Thomas Mulcair and his New Democratic Party, believe that Canadian troops shouldn't ever be sent on a mission unless the United Nations approves. And to me, that's a scary thought because it would give countries like Russia and China a veto over Canadian troop deployments. You can't get a mission approved by the United Nations without the Security Council, and why would we let Russia and China say where or when we can't send troops? Mulcair brought up the United Nations on more than one occasion when talking about Canadian foreign policy and Canadian troop deployment.
Would an NDP government ever send troops or jet fighters into combat? And if so, where?
Yes, we've shown that willingness in the past when it was based on a UN mandate. This is an American-led mission. This is not a United Nations mission.
So those statements leave you wondering, does he think that the UN has to have a say? Does he think that Canada can't act without the UN? I decided to ask him for clarification during the scrums.
You seem to be indicating in one of your responses about foreign policy that Canada might need to have UN approval for troop deployment. Is that accurate?
Thanks for asking your question that way. And of course, Brian, that's not what I said. Thank you. Any other questions?
Okay, we'll get back to the policy in a minute, but see that reaction, that snarky, angry reaction? That's the return of Angry Tom. That's the guy that the NDP has been trying to keep under wraps for the entire campaign, for the last year or so, actually. Tom Mulcair has a temper that's just below the surface. Lots of people have tempers, and Stephen Harper's is legendary, but the public doesn't get to see it, especially not reporters, media people with cameras trained on them. It doesn't happen. But it did with Mulcair again, and he has to watch out for that. As for the policy, the NDP, well, they were telling me after that exchange that it's not just the United Nations, it's multilateralism, it could be NATO, it could be another organization, but they want these international bodies to be our guiding principle. Mulcair's problem with the NATO mission right now is that it's not a NATO enough mission. The bombing campaign against ISIS may have Britain, it may have Germany, it may have the United States, it may have France, it may have so many of our existing partners, but it's not sanctioned by NATO, and therefore he's against it. He called it an American-led mission. The NDP needs to get serious on foreign policy if they want to be taken seriously. Mulcair talked about being proud members of NATO. They used to call for getting us out of NATO, and there's still a faction of his party that would like that. You can't have that type of policy set of ideals into this day and age, and you can't be outsourcing Canada's foreign policy to foreign organizations like the United Nations, which far too often give too much credence to human rights abusers like Iran being on human rights bodies, or to thugs and dictators like Robert Mugabe. Why should they get a say? Why should Russia or China get a say? It's a dangerous game. And of course, we have to remember that during the last election, Michael Ignatieff said that the Liberals would adopt that position. Justin Trudeau says that's not where his party is now, but it is a tendency of the left, and it's a dangerous one at that.